I love Truth or Dare, but my favorite was always Never Have I Ever.
Well, I hope that, when people do get to see this, that they play along, that there is a drinking game built into it. Either drink as the characters drink or drink as you're playing the game, if any of these things have happened.
Oof. Yeah, that'd be rough.
Maybe man doesn't want to be saved.
I snorted, Mama!
Does the Bible not tell us to lock our doors at night? We did so. And the angel of death flew about, killing as it did.
I think the way that I worked with Jeremy and Taylor in conjunction with this project was I knew that they came from a very different background than you did. For example, you have a very disciplined theatrical background, more formally trained, so you're no stranger to sort of mixing things up. But I thought really seeing the three of you come together, as well as with Rigo, who's was new to acting in a lot of ways, was one of the more interesting things to kind of watch meld and the way you all worked off of each other.
Jeremy in particular is very, he's very sort of fast and loose, and it's really fun to play off of that, just in terms of, the improv that naturally happens. I mean, so many of the best lines in the movie, as we were watching, it's like, oh, that was a quick Jeremy, we just throw some weird shit in, and it kept things very lively.
Hung out. I listened to David and Rigo record some fat tunes.
Well, I had met Rigo because we both worked at Glass Eye Pick sort of at two different times, and he'd worked in production for a number of years, and he just kind of started putting himself in short films that he was making and being in films from other filmmakers that we had known, and I was just like, this guy is amazing. He's just bound to be a movie star, and I had this part for him, and for me the part was really important to have sort of the voice of reason, the one person that the audience could point to and be like, okay, this guy has it figured out, listen to this guy. And of course, the voice of reason is axed.
Duly ignored.
Yeah.
I grew up going to church. I grew up in a culture where, where you go to church is a huge part of your cultural identity. So I went to church, I grew up in the church, I wasn't Catholic, but I was very involved. I was president of my youth choir, stuff. It was really interesting to kind of dive back into that part of my life, how as a person you can believe in sort of this more magical stuff and then funnel it through your life in this very intense way that really guides how you are as a person. And I think then with Father David, you just racked that up to 1,000. He's so devout and he's so dedicated. And my take on him is that, he's got a lot of stuff in his background that he's really trying to squelch down and trying to keep under the surface with his faith.
Setting that house that we shot in, it was sort of prepped and for the most part set deck before everyone showed up, and just having the crucifixes and playing religious music while everyone was around. Even as a director, I've found that, I have to kind of get into it in a method way as myself, not just while writing it, but also getting into pre-production and just sort of getting in the headspace, which was kind of easy. I was raised Catholic, so it's not a hard thing to kind of trip yourself back into that frequency of, sort of an underlying serenity, but with madness just around the corner.
Yeah, he's right, walking into that space. Because again, we were filming this during the pandemic, pre-vaccine. So the whole idea was we would go and essentially form our own bubble and just be living in this place. So here we are flying to a place that, we've never been. We walk into a house that's fully set decked as this extremely religious guy's house. Pictures of Jesus and Virgin Mary everywhere, crosses all over the place. That horrifying picture of Mama already hanging there, looking at us all the time. And yeah, it puts you in a headspace, It's because even in the middle of the night, you wake up and it's still there. Everything's there. And then and we filmed essentially, with a couple of exceptions, essentially in chronological order. So then as we're filming this movie, the house is also getting destroyed, and Christmas is starting to happen, and so you're really feeling it. It's very it was an intense shooting process, but I think it really helped get all of us in the right headspace.
We bring them face to face with God by bringing them face to face with us.
I've showed the film to, a variety of people, even outside of film festivals, that are both religious and not religious. And I think it's been taken a lot of different ways by a lot of different people. I mean, I know just even outside of the religious aspect for a second, I have a friend who, he's an older gentleman, lives in Los Angeles, has a guest house that he's always rented out to people, had a terrible experience with someone that rented out his guest house, trashed the place. So when he watched this movie, it struck a very familiar chord, and he's convinced that there's nothing supernatural happening in the movie. Everything was completely plotted by, Terry and Lexi, like down to the T, to drive this guy crazy. Even with sort of like the unwanted house guest aspect can influence the way that people are taking the film, and certainly the religious aspect as well. I mean, there's a number of people I showed it to that, religious and not religious, and I don't think that anyone's really taking it as an anti-religious film. I think I've not really had that response from anyone yet. I think if anything, it's just sort of taking a very simple act of kindness that is very common within Christianity and just sort of turning it on its head and letting it implode.
It's not anti-religious at all, in my opinion. This is not a movie that is actually making any kind of a statement about religion in general. It's making a statement about people. And I think Father David, it's dubious whether or not something supernatural is going on from Father David's perspective. From my perspective, I think yes, absolutely it is. I think that Terry is the devil.
Come on, man, I'm reading the Bible. I'm actually learning a lot. A couple drinks and some wicked tunes ain't gonna change that.
I think you're always looking for a happy accident after you write a script for so long, or after you're editing it for so long. You're by yourself for so long. So when you finally get into a room with people, I think any wise director is just like begging for something to happen that you wouldn't expect, that can bring some life into it, because it can feel very stilted until you get into that place and start to, chew up the script and work the scenes, which is what's great about working with all of them, is that they bring so much to it outside of what's just on the page.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of, like I said, like a lot of improv and a lot of stuff that was found in the play of it. I think specifically of the Never Have I Ever Seen, where there was a whole lot that was there that Taylor and Jeremy, really brought to it of this kind of menace and this fun and this chaos.
Never have I ever missed Mass on Sunday.
Well, you got me there. All right, go again.
Talking to Jeremy about this with one of our Q&As, it's like a scene like that where you have so much going on and he's the one pouring the drinks for everyone, and he's got so much busy work, which he notoriously loves. I think he was saying that helped him a lot in kind of like turning his brain off from what he had to say and just kind of instinctually be like, okay, well, you need to drink this and have a shot about this, and he's kind of like the bartender of that scene.
And I personally discovered a lot just while filming the scene of figuring out what is Father David really going through in this moment. Like what is the memory that comes up when he says, have you ever, wanted to kiss a priest, or have you ever, gone to a club, and like what's that club memory for him? So that it was just a really interesting experience filming that scene. It was really special.
When you have a movie that's propulsively trying to move forward, the last thing you want to do is stop and get into exposition. And you're trying to find a way to move the scene forward while still getting a hint of who these people are and asking yourself some more questions. I mean, I think the first Terminator is probably like the best example of the backstory being revealed as they're flying down the street in a car. So while we didn't have a car to speed down the street, and I felt like we at least had forward momentum in a scene that could be sort of, through the context of this game, revealing a little bit about them.
The burning of impurities. From this point forward, we forget everything about last night.
When COVID happened, there was so much talk in the the news about how in the media about how filmmakers are going to have to learn to work with fewer actors and smaller budgets and fewer locations, and the whole industry is going to have to make a change. And I think all of us independent filmmakers looked at each other. We thought, well, we've been doing this for decades. This is what we were doing before COVID. So having to work with the limitations is something that that's, I think for a lot of us, it's exciting. It breeds the best ideas. So when you have your film family, people you've worked with over the years, or actors that you've admired, that are willing to come together and sort of just engage in this crazy creative experience during like one of the craziest time in our lives we've ever experienced, was just like amazing.
Everybody that's there really wants to be there, and sort of knew exactly what they were getting into, and I think that breeds the best kind of indie filmmaking.
That was my entry point into film production, was make a movie with what you have, and really the best thing that a director can have is a close group of friends and colleagues that are great actors, and a great cinematographer, someone that's really has the ear for sound, music, all of these things. I mean, it doesn't take too many people, but you just got to have the right people.
What is that?
It's Mama, David! It's Mama!
I loved filming the scene where I encounter Terry snorting Mama. The scene is just so chaotic and nuts, and the way it's all lit. There's Christmas lights everywhere. And that was just a really sort of surreal thing. As cold and as strange as it was, I really enjoyed shooting in the church. Especially that opening scene. It's there's nothing really crazy happening, but for me that was so important to really get into Father David's head. And then obviously that sort of final sequence where I'm giving my Christmas Eve service and I'm sitting in that chair. I mean, that was just such a wild thing, and we're also like, worried about the nuns, like seeing what we're doing, and like true like guerrilla filmmaking. Like, all right, Graham, get your bandages on your head. We're putting you in this ice cold church, and you're gonna be screaming about death angels. It's like, this is what I love about doing movies. This is great.
And perhaps these death angels are among us still.
Once everyone was in that house and no one was getting sick, and all of us, we were getting our COVID tests and they were coming back clear, I think we all felt better about this sort of just crazy little like group that we put together. I think just once everyone was there, I felt good about it.
Yeah, those first like 4 or 5 days were stressful, I think, for everybody, because it was just like, once we've been there for like 5 days and nobody's gotten sick yet, okay, we're good to go. Once we sort of cleared that first bump, then it was like, all right, great, we can really make a movie.
What I love about horror, and what would be difficult about stepping outside of horror, is that with horror you're using every piece of the cinematic language. I mean, watching so many films at Fright Fest this weekend, working in the genre myself, you just realize every craftsperson, every just strange person you encounter in the facet of like horror is what makes these movies, like special effects, makeup, acting, cinematography. I mean, I don't know how often I read reviews about, a standard drama or just a comedy that really comments on all the individual parts. But with a horror movie, it's all on display.
And that's the power of horror. It digs into you, and it just becomes a part of you. And I totally get, my wife is not a horror fan, and I get that. I totally get that. But for me, it's a part of my DNA.